to the agenda here on Labour Social. We're on Phil's computer today because mine's not working properly. So I'm dialing in. I'm dialing in from Liverpool, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about this week because it's been a bit of a crazy week, hasn't it, Phil? We've had the one of the most right wing Tory MPs joining Labour, like just before Prime Minister's questions.
Yes. Yeah, no one knew. And this is the time to do it. I said, when Lee Anderson did, I mean, it wasn't really defection, Lee Anderson's case, because he was an independent at the time anyway. He'd been chucked out of the party. So this is the second time he's been chucked out of a party and just gone to a more extreme party. And I've just had a warning about bitrate here, but hopefully it'll be fine. And the other problem, is... if you announce the defection nowhere near PMQs, then the Prime Minister has time to go through it with their advisors and work out how they're going to play it. It's still going to be potentially damaging, but you don't... Whereas if you announce it just before, or better still, because they didn't announce it at all. So I found out what happened. It was all very surreal for me because I wasn't watching it live because I had internet problems of my own last week. So the engineer was here at PMQs, so I had to watch it on catch-up. So I knew the defection had happened before I started watching PMQs. And what had happened was, so normally Natalie Elphicke would be sat with the likes of Jonathan Gullis, and when Lee Anderson was a Conservative MP, he sat in that sort of area as well. It's like Brexit Central. Jonathan Gullis apparently was looking around. So where's she gone? He obviously missed her. And apparently Penny Mordaunt had looked across because she was like they do this every time they get someone to defect, because this is the third time it's happened this Parliament now. So she was sat basically behind Keir Starmer. Penny Mordaunt saw this and went, oh no. And she went out to tell Rishi Sunak as he was coming into the chamber, you're going to have some fun today. I don't know what she actually said to him. And it completely threw him. You're watching this.
Well, it threw me. It threw me, mate. I was doing it live. I was doing my live PMQ commentary. Yeah. And he said, and at the time, I had WhatsApp going off in my pocket because everyone's like, "Oh my God, there's been a defection. There's been a defection." And then, but by the time I sort of realised who it was, Keir Starmer had already said the MP for Dover. And I thought, has he made a mistake? Because I knew that the MP for Dover was Natalie Elphicke. And I was thinking, there's no way that she is going to join Labour. And I know that this has pissed off a lot of people on the left, a lot of people in the Labour Party. It's pissed off all the people who hate Starmer anyway. But I got to say, as a gotcha, for the Tories' flagship policy of stopping the boats, getting the MP who is, whose constituency is most affected by people coming over in small boats, getting them to cross the floor. It's the equivalent of getting Michael Gove to cross the floor just before the Brexit vote. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how did you do that? And as much as I don't really want to be in a political party with Natalie Elphicke, I mean, the alternative is she goes to bloody Reform and gives them, a big bump.
Yeah. So my attitude to it, and I said myself in my own video, see, if I'd have been, I mean, this will have been at shadow cabinet level. And if I was asked, I would have said no. But the reason I'd have said no wasn't strategic. And I know it's not strategic. It's because, it's uncomfortable being associated with her. And I would be thinking in my own mind, I can see the damage this will cause, but can't we get someone less abhorrent, so like Pol Pot, for example, at least he was a socialist. But I thought to myself, but realistically,
Pot wasn't a socialist.
He was.
He shot people dead for wearing glasses.
He was an authoritarian, but he was still a socialist.
He was a national socialist.
There was violent socialists. No, he tried to start an actual,
agricultural revolution, killing everyone who'd been to university.
Oh yeah, he was authoritarian, but he was still. I mean, socialists aren't all nice people, are they? Some of them are arseholes. there's people already in Labour. I mean, when people talk about Natalie Elphicke, oh, how can we have someone like this in Labour? Can I remind people we had Kate Hoey in Labour for goodness knows how long?
That's true. Well, she was campaigning with the Brexit Party.
Yeah, and still
she was
didn't
a
lose
Labour
the whip.
MP.
Still didn't lose the whip. But I mean, she had been fairly abhorrent herself. I mean, you know, you look at her views on immigration. So under multiple leaders, I'm sorry, we have welcomed those sort of behaviours, those sort of comments. She didn't suddenly turn all Brexiteer and anti-immigration when she left Parliament. She was like that before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, Natalie Elphicke, I under normal circumstances, I wouldn't like this at all, and that's why
I don't like it. I honestly don't like it. But
strategically, it works.
I can see why they've done it. I hate it, to be honest with you. I can't stand that she is in the same party as us when she's so horrible.
But at the same time, is like when we say she's so horrible, we focus on obviously her personal behaviour over the trial of her former husband, as well as her immigration attitudes. Now, the Brexit attitudes, you could argue, are not horrible attitudes. We just strongly disagree with them. But her attitude towards asylum in particular and immigration in general is unpleasant. And yet, the thing she's actually going to be doing in Labour is helping on housing policy, and she has for a very long time, for years before, and you can read stuff she's written, for years before she ever became an MP, she has campaigned against homelessness and campaigned for the building of more houses in order to make sure that young people can afford decent accommodation.
Can we just talk for a moment about housing? Like the Tories, I go on a lot about the Tories. They don't know how to build anything. They just know how to destroy. But I can't think of a more clear example than the building of houses. They have got a policy, and it might not be overt. They might not be putting it in the manifesto, but it's of blocking as many houses being built as possible in order to make current house prices go up because of a manufactured shortage in homes. And they've done that on purpose because they know that their voters love it when the house price goes up. You know, you're living in this house that you bought in 1963 for $2,000 and now it's worth $500,000. Ha ha ha. Look at me. Aren't I the Wolf of Wall Street? They think as they literally die in that house. So what does it matter? They're not going to sell it anyway. But and this needs to be called out. So there's that. But also I was thinking with Elphicke, she being the MP for Dover, we're probably going to see some massive queues at Dover this summer of like stuff going in, you know, coming in and coming out and people trying to get through. And now she can say, oh, that's all the Tories' fault. I mean, it's the fault of Brexit. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, she'll certainly not blame Brexit, but she will now. It'll be interesting. I'll tell you what, it will be interesting because she'll now be free to say it's the incompetence of the way Brexit is being managed, if she wants. Coming back onto housing, though, I will just note, so again, in terms of where we have these funny ideas and left and right and so on as well, you know, one of a former Prime Minister who did an epic level of house building was Harold Macmillan, and he was a Conservative Prime Minister. Yeah. So attitudes can change. I mean, obviously this was it wasn't immediately post-war, mind you, but it was post-war.
That was 1950s. But I mean, do you reckon he was just, he could see the future? He thought, well, make sure everyone's got a house, got a mortgage. Less likely to go on strike if you've got a mortgage. You've got to make those repayments or you lose your house.
The thing is, I mean, Conservatives know that they benefit from home ownership. And I suppose, this is before my time, and I'm not a historian myself. I'm certainly not a political historian. But I can imagine that home ownership was rapidly increasing at the time, because there wouldn't have been much of it before the Second World War. Yeah. I mean, at that time, I think it was still the case. I mean, it was actually until quite recently, a woman couldn't actually own property, or they could, but it was very rare for them to. You couldn't get a mortgage as a woman, but I think that was the case even when I was born.
My former partner's mum, she worked for a bank. She was quite high up in a bank in the 1970s, and she couldn't get a mortgage from that bank because she wasn't married. Yeah. True story.
So, you know, you can imagine that after the war, there was a huge increase in sort of home ownership, albeit it had to be like the nuclear family buying the home. or a male bachelor. But I say male bachelor. Bachelor is the male version. But, nonetheless, this Conservative Prime Minister embarked on a huge level of house building. And it should make sense. What the current Conservatives have done doesn't actually make sense. It's short-termism. It's all about giving into the NIMBYs. We need to build more houses because we build more houses, more people buy more houses.
Not like that.
But then people say, but don't build them here or don't build them there. So they go, all right then. But, and now they're coming up with ideas like, oh, well, what we should have just is build entirely new towns and cities, like do a Milton Keynes thing. Well, why didn't you do that then?
Well, I mean, why do that when there's loads of space? I mean, we were driving down East Lancs Road yesterday. There's loads of space for building there, and there's nothing being done. And what the Tories will do is say, oh, that's now greenfield. It's not. It's a brownfield site. It was industry there, and it's not anymore. And it's on the outskirts of a city, and it's a perfect place good transport links. It's a good place to build new buildings. But what we also do, Phil, is when it is in the design of a modern estate, like your Barrett Redrow estate, you've got to have a car. You don't have streets with a corner shop at the end and one end and a pub at the other. Right. It's all cul-de-sacs with these buildings that can't be repurposed for anything. So in Liverpool, for instance, we've got these beautiful Georgian townhouses, terraced townhouses in Liverpool, and they've all been repurposed. Not all of them. Some of them are still homes, but a lot of them are something else. There's doctor surgeries, there's bars, there's restaurants, because they can be used for someone else. Barratt homes can only ever be used as a Barratt home. You're not going to set it up as something else. A commercial interest. I've just got to jump in with a super chat that we've got from One Angry Pagan. Thank you so much. I hate it. Talking about the defection of Elphick to Labour. I hate it, but it put Sunak off balance in PMQs. Smiley face. Yeah, exactly. And there's a really good point made by Michael here, a bit further back in the chat, where he says, people are idiots. I own one house. When I sell it, I will have one house in money to buy a new house. The worth of your house goes up, but so does everyone else's. Housing market is a con. Yeah.
Well, we could segue that in with one of the Tories' latest attack lines this week is the Gordon Brown selling off the gold reserves. They're still going on about that. Oh, it cost us this much money. It's like, no, it didn't. It made us money. So what happened was, early on, Gordon Brown sold some of our gold reserves. For a start, we don't really have much in gold reserves anyway. We never did. No. Well, we haven't in recent times. So he sold off some gold reserves, and people, oh, but it cost us this much. No, it didn't. So what the Tories have done is they've worked out the price at which we sold the gold and how much it is in whatever the day's terms are when they want to attack it, right? And they say this is how much money we lost. It's like, no, because when we had the gold and the gold reserves we still have don't make us any money. It's just gold in a vault. Yeah. And Gordon Brown didn't sell the gold and then spend it on pizzas. He diversified it. He bought bonds, which do give you a profit. So he basically invested in currency, which not only has a value as long as you don't invest in a country that goes under to the toilet, like just as well he didn't invest in the UK. But you've you're also getting a passive income from it, because when the bonds mature, you get the money.
But also, we don't produce gold. This is the one thing that always, this is why we went off the gold standard. That's why America went off the gold standard. There's no gold. Well, I suppose there was gold in America during the gold rush and stuff, but once that was over, I mean, we haven't had gold in this country since the freaking Romans. It's 2,000 years that the gold's been gone. So we're completely beholden to the amount of gold produced in Papua New Guinea and South Africa each year as to what the global price of gold's going to be. It fluctuates all over the place, and we have no control over it whatsoever. And so, at least with other forms of investments, we have some degree of control over what's happening with them. Although the Tories, I wouldn't put them in charge of anything.
As you've mentioned Papua New Guinea, that's an interesting segue to go back to immigration asylum. There was some news earlier this week. Have you seen it? So 5 people have gone to Australia seeking asylum by unconventional means. The Tories would call them illegal immigrants. Actually, the Australian government would do as well. And the Tory, people in here are always saying, as an excuse for why we should leave the European Court of Human Rights, oh, Australia are in the European Convention of Human Rights and they can deal with asylum properly. First of all, do you want to have a guess where these 5 asylum seekers are from? It's hilarious.
Papua New Guinea.
No. They've come through Papua New Guinea. That was the segue there. Australia are going to try and get Papua New Guinea to take them back, but they're probably not going to. Now, guess where they've come from?
Indonesia,
Rwanda.
Afghanistan. Rwanda. Oh, wow.
They've come from Rwanda. So Australia, first of all, is not going to deport them back to Rwanda because it's not safe. And in fact, this news article was saying, although they're going to try and persuade, because they passed through Papua New Guinea, it's a typical case of, when they say, oh, they passed through France, therefore they came through France, France is safe, they should stay there. Australia are going to try and do this, and you try it on, they're going to try and do the same thing. But if Papua New Guinea do not guarantee to take them back without deporting them to Rwanda, Australia, by their own, because it's the UN, it's an international law. It's not the European Convention on Human Rights. This is the UN Refugee Convention, which Australia are signed up to, that determines this. They will have to take care of them themselves. Now, the way they'll take care of them is they'll process them offshore. That's what Australia do. For anyone who arrives in Australia illegally to claim asylum, they have an offshore processing centre. So they'll take them there, but they will process those claims. And if those claims are valid, they will accept them. That is the Australian system. Yeah. And we could do exactly the same, but with the processing centre in France.
Yes. They've got a processing centre in Papua New Guinea, and they've also got one in Nauru.
It's Nauru that they'll be going to.
Is it? I thought they were winding that one down.
Well, they may well be, but at the moment, that is where they're going.
Nauru is... I can speak at length about Nauru. It's a really messed up place, and they don't get enough water anymore because they've destroyed their own environment. There's cases of water having to be brought in from Australia a few thousand miles on a big tanker, to Nauru because they just don't have enough fresh water.
Right.
It's kind of crazy. Johnny Copperhead, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Oh, yeah, and also Craig, thank you very much for the super chat. Craig says, but if they had that gold now, they could use it to fund tax cuts. Yeah, indeed. Johnny Cophead there saying, surely the way the Tories let water companies run riot everywhere is a brownfield site.
If it's next to a river, well made. I mean, there was some more recent boat. It was that Henley or something like that, where they had to be just cancelled. So although the Oxford-Cambridge boat race went ahead, even though they all became very ill, a couple of other, I suppose, lesser boat races, but nonetheless notable ones around Henley, had to be cancelled completely because of shit just floating there.
Yeah. It's mad, isn't it? Anyway, do you think that I predicted the response from the usual sort of corners of the left, especially Owen Jones's piece for The Guardian? That could have been written by AI. If you typed into AI, this has happened, write an article in the style of Owen Jones. It's exactly what you'd expect it to be. Basically saying, Labour are morally bereft. But as we try and explain at length on this channel, they have to win this election. Well, that's their job right now.
Well, actually, I'll bring another comment in. I'm not sure. I've never thought of this myself. I understand the need to... See, the way I've looked at it is... So, in Labour to win, with the first past the system, needs to do two things. First of all, gather as many votes to themselves as they can in the areas where they can realistically win. And secondly, suppress their opponent's vote, which is in the vast majority of places the Conservatives. So they want to suppress the Conservative vote. So they're detoxifying themselves. They're making Conservative voters who will not vote Labour go, well, okay, I can't vote for this, but it's probably better, and they won't put the fingerprints on it, they won't vote for it, but they won't vote Conservative either because they're thinking, well, it can't be that bad. So that's my way of looking at it. Now, someone else, I'll read it out to you, which is a step further that I'd not considered, but you couldn't rule it out. And he said here, I've said this before, the Starmer strategy has always seemed to me to be declaring his party is now basically, and by the way, people in Labour, we will hate this thought, by the way, but it's possible, has always seemed to me to be declaring his party is now basically Labour and the Tories combined, with the actual Tories being UKIP. Downsides, this pisses people off on the left. Upside, half the country votes for you.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that is the thinking, but you couldn't rule it out based on it. As I say, my thinking is I think you just... Because you don't even need to do that. You just need to make people who won't vote for you think, but... it'll be better than this incompetence. Where that becomes a downside later on is once the Conservatives have been out of power for a bit, you won't be able to label them as incompetent because it'll be different. Because incompetence is not a matter of political ideology or policy, it's a matter of individuals. And as soon as the individuals are changed, you will not be able to label the Conservatives incompetent. Hence why electoral reform is needed, because it doesn't matter how ruthlessly focused Starmer is on winning. First of all, he will be replaced at some point. You know, he's not going to be a leader for the ages because he doesn't have the charisma. Even if he doesn't have an Iraq war level mess up, he's not going to, you know, as soon as the Conservatives start to be a bit more crowd pleasing, we're in trouble. And his successor will not necessarily be as focused, but even if they are, naturally people start to want, you're not going to stay in power forever. So we need electoral reform. That's the only way to head this off.
Ivan Ambrose, thank you very much for this £20 super chat. That's really generous. Thank you. Selling off a few gold reserves is nothing compared to the Tories selling off our public services.
There is that as well. I mean, Rishi Sunak basically made 4 times as much as what they're claiming that this gold reserve cost us 21 billion. As I say, it didn't. It made us money, but you know that would still be between 4 and 5 times less than Rishi Sunak made just disappear in 2020. And I don't mean spent on things that I didn't think were a good value for money. I mean just literally disappeared. It's like, well, what was that money spent on? Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Karen is saying it'll take time to turn things around, and got James saying the Tories are still labelling the last Labour government as incompetent due to the note left. Yeah, that was actually brought up in Prime Minister's questions this week again. The fact that they left a joke note saying there's no money left in 2010, which you know, when our economy was worth about $3 trillion in 2010. Do you know how much it's worth now, Phil?
At 2.8.
Around $3 trillion. But yeah, there's no money left. I mean, I think if anything, it just shows that the Tories can't take a joke or don't understand what a joke is.
It's their own joke. They started this tradition that every change of government, Chief Secretary of the Treasury just like writes this note. It was lit. The first one was "Sorry, old cock, there's no money." It was set by a Conservative when Labour were coming to power in like the 60s or something.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing the tradition's going to die.
I'm guessing it's finished now.
Well, no, they might actually, because genuinely there will be no money at the end of this government. So yeah, that makes sense.
It'd be funnier just to say, you know, leave Rishi Sunak a note instead of saying, "Sorry, there's no MPs left."
Well, yeah. So this is mad poll this week that showed the Tories 30 points behind Labour, which, if translated into a general election, I mean, it's never going to be this extreme, but it would put this is a YouGov poll as well, so it's not like it's not Redfield and Wilson, who I know you don't like, Phil, and it would leave them with 13 seats, 13 seats, be absolutely beyond decimated. Well,
I mean, the thing, so YouGov are one of the absolute best ones, but where they clearly have a weakness is in that, like a lot of online pollsters they seem to be inflating Reform UK's share of the vote. I think there's 2 problems with Reform UK's vote or polling. First of all, like if we look at, I should have prepared a graphic for this, but if we look at like I was looking at this earlier, the London mayoral contest. So the results for that, there were 2 pollsters who produced a poll, what I would say is, you know, within a couple of weeks of the actual poll itself. There were other pollsters that did a poll of it, but it was too far away from it to be of any value. Savanta got closest. So Labour got 44% and the Tories got 33%. And Savanta said that Labour would get 46% and Conservatives 33%. So they were pretty bang on there. And YouGov thought Labour would get 47, which is only a little bit more. But they thought the Tories would only get 25. So they massively underplayed the Tory vote share. And the reason for that is because they hyped up the Reform UK share. They thought Reform UK would get 6% when they got 3.2%. And that is what will happen. If you inflate Reform UK's share of the vote, you are going to naturally downplay the Conservative share of the vote because Reform UK's votes are basically all coming from the Tories. And I think YouGov are guilty of that. I think that I think they're overstressing Reform UK, and that's where things like this happen. But then what I did, I thought, okay, because Savanta clearly aren't, they're not one of the ones I mean, they may be downplaying Reform UK show the vote. In fact, if you look at the London mayoral elections, they were, because they thought Reform UK would get 2%, they actually got 3.2. So maybe Savanta are too far the other way. But if you put Savanta's last national polling into electoral calculus, now this was about a month ago, so it's a bit out of date, and all polls that have come out since, there's been 3 come out since the locals, they've all shown the gap widening in the last week. But based on that one from Savanta from last month, the Tories would still even then be only on 132 seats.
Wow.
Now, that's okay. We want it to be way fewer than that, and with tactical voting, hopefully it will
that'll be the fewest.
But that is still, that is still, for a 200-year-old party, their worst ever result.
Yeah, it was about 150 odd, wasn't it, in 1997?
Something like that.
Owen, in the chat, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. El Thicko makes sense now. Accepting her completely undermines Rishi Sunak's stop the boat pledge, because every time he opens his mouth now, Keir only needs to point to a seat on his aisle.
It's even better than that, because over summer, so the Tories are mad for leaving the election this late. They never should have left it this late. It's their own fault. What will happen is, so at the moment, it now becomes a pissing contest between who's got the best plan, Labour or the Conservatives. They can't claim that Labour don't have a plan, because a stop the boats Brexiteer has just said, well, actually, the Labour plan's best, so they must have a plan.
So exactly.
Over summer, Sunak's plan will be shown to fail, because the whole point of it is to stop the boats. What's going to stop the boats? Nothing.
It's already been shown to fail. 1,500 people have come over in the last 2 weeks. 1,500.
But that's not getting through to the media. But what they will focus on is what's those numbers looking like in August.
Yeah.
And they'll be reporting one or two things. They may be reporting record, if they're still reporting record channel crossings in August, over a month after Rishi Sunak said the flights would be setting off, and maybe they will have set off, then where does your policy go from there? Because if you can actually get a flight in the air to Rwanda, you cannot blame anyone. You can't blame civil servants, because obviously it went. You can't blame Labour. You can't blame them anymore, because it's gone through the House of Lords, and it went through exactly as he wanted it to.
Yeah.
There's no one left to blame.
One angry pagan saying farmers now see Tories don't care. Labour should reach out to them. Labour are. The head of Save British Farming, Liz Webster, she's actually defected from the Lib Dems. I think she stood as a councillor actually for the Lib Dems. She's defected to Labour. And if you watch Clarkson's Farm, season 3's just come out, and that is very much it's not very complimentary about the Tory government, especially about the fact that we've pulled out the common agricultural policy because we left the EU, and there's been nothing to replace it. And also we've signed these terrible deals, these trade deals with Australia, where they get to sell us 20,000 tons of beef tariff-free a year, and we don't get to sell them any beef, not even a soggy brisket.
And I'm trying to recall the reason for that basically is because we can, in theory, the deal does let us. However, the amount of paperwork required to export anything to Australia takes so long that by the time a normal business has gone through, well, no, it's not even just that. You mean you can still do it, like as soon as you're set up, but it takes so long and it's so difficult that unless you're intending to sell a lot to Australia, you're not going to be able to. It's not worth it. It's not worth the man hours, the cost of the man hours for someone to go through this incredibly opaque. Because Australia is a very, very protectionist market. You know, it's really difficult to access. And we've got a trade deal that in theory allows us to. It's like, oh yeah, we've in theory got enhanced access, but the paperwork required, it's like you've got to jump through so many hoops. It's like one of those things online where you go, click on this test and we'll tell you your personality. And you do it, and it says, oh, right, give us your email. And you go, and then they still don't email it. It says, right, now you need to pay this money. And that's what the Australian, that's what British beef exporters are finding. In fact, someone tried last month or the month before or something, they tried to export some beef jerky to Australia. And it was and they were looking at this and basically they were saying it's going to take us months to get through this. It's not worth it. We just wanted to sell them a bit of jerky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, remember when we had the whole "Let's go WTO" nonsense, and everyone was like, "Are you insane?"
Yeah.
Like the WTO tariff on frozen beef was like 800%. It was just something absolutely off the charts. Like, can you believe it's that much?
Countries that produce their own beef want to protect their own industry.
And the EU's got, the WTO's got a thing called the most favored nation clause, where you can't give favoritism to a particular country unless you've got a trade deal with them. And if you haven't got a trade deal with them, you've got to give everyone else the same access and tariffs as them. And the WTO set these baseline tariffs to work from, and they were just outrageous. They were ridiculous. And obviously they made it so that no country on earth would trade just on WTO rules. I think Mauritania did for a while, but even they got some trade deals with their neighbors, maybe Senegal. I don't think they're very good friends with Algeria and Morocco, considering they had a war with them in the 1980s. But one Aggie Pagan saying, if farmers are now seeing their folly, we should show compassion, not derision. Otherwise, we're really no better than the Tories. That's just very magnanimous of you. No, I don't think we should be deriding the farmers. I mean, they were lied to as much as anyone else was. It was just a bit galling to drive down to Glastonbury in 2016 and see so many farmers' fields with vote Brexit. And I'm like this. I saw a DHL van. The German company, the logistics company, DHL, a German van, and they'd written "Vote Brexit" with their finger in the dirt on the back of the van on the motorway on the day of the referendum, and I'm just like, my God, you work for a German company, you're driving their van, and you're like, no, down with this kind of thing. Oh, anyway, 31 Blaze says, why don't Tories protect anything in this country? Do they have to swear against this sort of thing when they join? I don't get their mentality.
They just really what they're doing is they're funded by people who just want. They're disaster capitalists. They're funded by disaster capitalists. The disaster capitalists fund the think tanks who will write stuff that comes out of the likes of Policy Exchange and IEA and stuff. It's written not for general members of the public, although they publish it. It's written for gullible Tory MPs to make it sound like they're batch. But these are all funded by like a few billionaires.
Yeah.
You can tell how few there were. Elon Musk, was it Elon Musk who hosted it? He was certainly there. I think he hosted this anti-Biden dinner. And there was like 8 billionaires there, including Rupert Murdoch and some other scoundrels. And it's just there's a really small number of people behind this sort of economic thinking.
But Rupert Murdoch proper winds me up, man. How can a man born a century ago, thousands of miles away, who's never been British, never been a British citizen, never paid tax in Britain, how can he have so much power over the minds of the people who live here? Exactly. It's galling. It's absolutely galling. And every time a celebrity dies, like Bernard Hill, all I can think is, why do I have to live in a world where Bernard Hill is no longer here, but Rupert Murdoch is? Countdown to Power says, I did a 10-hour drive down to Glasgow in 2016. I saw those signs. It's why I find it hard to forgive farmers.
But if you want to change anything, and this goes back to the Natalie Elphicke as well, if you want to change anything, you have to realise, like, when you are like me, who most of my life has been on the losing side of almost every political argument, the way to win a political argument is by having more people on your side. And so you have to actually want people who've been your opponents to come over to your side. That's the only way to do it. So you can either live your life being really angry at people, or you can say that actually we should be angry at the people stoking division in our society, who are getting people to believe these things. It's like the old saying, this is for, you get this in America a lot, but it applies equally here in lots of contexts. It's like, no, an immigrant didn't take your job. What happened was the rich capitalist sacked you and employed the immigrant because they were cheaper so they could make more profit, and they are laughing that you are blaming the immigrant, not them. And that sort of thinking applies everywhere. We're allowing these people to divide us when we should be, because if people were to actually be informed, there is no way that even people on the right wing, they'd still be right wing, there are still right wing views, but they wouldn't believe that what the Conservatives are doing is in their interest if they were properly informed. And so we need to, and the same thing applies to Brexit or anything else, or austerity. All of these things, if it had been explained properly to people, they would never have gone away with it. They'd been like, not even 1% would go along with it. So you have to understand that people are, most people are not arseholes. There are people who are arseholes. Most people are not. Yeah. They're just being misinformed.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the problem. The people who control the means of communication and information aren't the good people. No. And especially when you've got people like Musk buying Twitter, and there's you know, I was really hoping that Twitter will fall on its arse as a result of that. I know Tesla has. Tesla's posted some really shocking figures because a lot of people who were generally a bit on the left and a bit, you know, hippie-ish and wanted an electric car, they've turned away from Tesla in droves because of Musk's behavior. But Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace. He ended up selling it at like a $50 million loss, but nowhere near as big as Musk's. But his agenda in that was to control how people talk to each other, and that's what Musk does on Twitter. Where, you know, 2 years ago when I was using it, you get a couple of trolls. That was about it. But now it's just a free-for-all. Every time you post something, you'll get a response that says something like nudes in bio. And you get a bunch of trolls, like, just which are kind of like using the same word in a different kind of order. It just looks quite AI generated, like these bot farms. And it's painful. It's painful to see what's happened to what was, you know, a bit, you know, a half decent forum for discussion. And the only way, really, you could write to somewhat, you know, the rich and the powerful, and actually they might read your message, because otherwise, unless they're, you know, your MP and they have to, they'll just ignore it.
You say they have to. It was Marco Longhi, wasn't it, who earlier this week has basically said, oh, yeah, I'm completely ignoring constituents I don't like.
Oh, my God, did he?
He was the one who said, you know, I have decided not to allow asylum seekers into my surgeries. I'm not doing anything for them. And it's like, mate, if they live in your constituency, they're your constituents. You've got a duty.
Oh, my God. What's this guy's name?
I think it was Marco Longhi. I hope I'm not slandering anyone now. I'm pretty sure it was him. I better look it up, hadn't I?
It doesn't sound British. A name like Marco. He's the MP.
We're very multicultural in this country. It's just that, you know, when they Tories, they're the sort of people who pull the ladder up.
We went to Manchester Uni, mate. He's nothing down for him. It's a terrible place. I don't know if Phil heard me say that.
Sorry, I'm trying to type. It was Marco Longhi.
Yeah. I said it. Yeah.
Not bad.
A bit of an shame. Anyway, he went to Manchester Uni. I was just saying, terrible place. That's why he turned out the way he did, Phil.
It's an awesome place. But I don't know that it shaped rather my my personality. But you know, I suppose it depends. I didn't go to the debating society or anything.
I did. I was in the Manchester University debating society with Rob Rinder and a bunch of others. We went to like Oxford and Cambridge and debated against these people who were just insanely posh. I think I met someone called Napoleon.
What was it? A dog?
No, it was a real human being who spoke exactly like you'd expect someone called Napoleon to speak. Number 3 says people fight against changing their minds, especially when they are delusional. As many via ignorance are. They're really hard work. It's like trying to have a sensible conversation with a drunk.
But it is, though. I mean, most people like you or I, if like someone challenged our views, we're going to be instantly critical. It's a bit of a problem. It's why you need to be a bit aware when someone says something you agree with. You actually have to be a bit more careful, because you will less critically accept something that feeds into your bias. Yes. But if something challenges it, you are naturally more critical, which is fine, which is the way you're supposed to be. But you just have to accept that maybe some aspect of your thinking is wrong, and you have to give them a chance, as long as they're not a raging idiot.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard enough to change the mind of someone that you know and love trying to change the mind of someone whose mind's made up on the doorstep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? When you're out canvassing, it ain't gonna happen. When there was nothing for Labour the other
someone's
week,
mind. I got in trouble for it.
Your pointer's on my face, Phil. Your pointer is on my face. Get it? There you go. It's gone. Right, sorry, go on. Whose mind did you change? On the
stream. No, I went out canvassing for the Selby and Ainsty by-election. The problem is I was talking for so long, my handler had to come back and oink me away. But I beat him. I beat him to a maybe. He was a definite not voting Labour. He wasn't going to vote Conservative either, to be fair, because he wasn't impressed with, I've forgotten the guy's, was it Nick Adams or something? The previous MP, the one who pissed off because he couldn't be a Lord. The other Nadine Dorries. And except he didn't write a letter to Rishi Sunak saying, "Why aren't I a Lord?
Why aren't I a Lord? This is disgraceful."
But
things I did.
No, I was talking to this guy for a very long time. But I beat him to a maybe, and he was quite, so I managed to find, it took me a while, I'm not a natural salesperson, it found me a while to identify the things he approves of and then point out how the Labour candidate we had met those points. I did it.
Oh, wow.
He may not have voted Labour in the end, and it probably wasn't worth the time it took me. But, I still managed to change his mind. You can do it with enough time, it's just that we don't have enough time with enough people.
Yeah, I don't think I changed anyone's mind during the Brexit debate, the Brexit wars. I do remember though, we were on the bollocks of the Brexit bus, and we kind of got attacked when it came to Durham, which is embarrassing because it was my sort of home turf now, my adopted home turf, and there were a bunch of these Britain First knobheads who turned up, but like I tried talking to them and saying, look, why are you siding with Nigel Farage? Why are you siding with these Tories like Boris Johnson? Do you think they really care about you? I was trying to ask them about their lives and what's important in their lives, and that it's difficult because they'll say, refugees coming here taking my job. I'm like, what job was it that was taken by a refugee? Because I don't believe that you were that bad at your job that someone who doesn't even speak the language and has no qualifications and no home to live in can come along and nick your job off you. What
happened was someone very rich just did away with your job if they lost a job at all.
Yeah, so they can make more money.
Yeah,
with lower production values. Vendetta's replying to Don saying in the 1990s they remade it then, but it was an Australian UK remake, and they redid some of the same stories from the 1970s version, where there's a US version, the best one in my opinion, just reuse some. I don't actually know what you're talking about there, Vendetta.
I think that's a private conversation going on.
I'm trying to make out what do they remake in the 1990s? Babylon 5. No.
It should, because the actual film stuff was absolutely fine. It was just the Amiga pissing graphics for the space scenes. They should do it again, use all the same footage, but just do the space scenes properly.
Yeah.
Right? It's embarrassing that it's now lower spec than Doctor Who. So, they could do that and they'd make a load of money. I'd buy those DVDs again. They should just do
DVDs, though. People aren't buying them, are they?
Blu-rays, then, I don't care. But I would buy them. I would buy them. I've got them all, but I would buy them again. I say I'm all of it. I never got season 5 because there's no point. But I got all the other ones, including the specials.
Hey, did you hear that Peter Jackson and Andy Serkis are making a new Lord of the Rings film?
Yeah, God. No.
Ooh. Yeah. Ooh. No, I'm excited about it.
I don't need a pissing Gollum backstory.
Well, okay. But I do. I want it. Come on, Gollum's great. The Hunt for Gollum. Yeah, it's going to be like a crime detective film. It's going to be like a Scandi noir film.
Would it, though?
Set in Middle-earth.
Do you know what? I know nothing about it other than it's Peter Jackson and Andy Serkis, so I'm only assuming it'll be a Gollum film. But would it be...
It is. It's called
would it be turning from Smeagol to Gollum, or would it be Gollum when he's been captured,
pursued,
in Barad-dûr and stuff like that?
Yes, right. Captured in Barad-dûr.
Even so. I mean, I'm still not sure I want to watch it. But okay, whatever. Milk the cow
two
more.
films. Two films.
Oh my God! Yeah, they're just milking it at this point. Can you?
Well, that's what Johan says. He says the cash cow wasn't barren yet. It seems. Sorry. Vendetta's talking about the Tomorrow People, the Australian sci-fi.
All right, yeah.
That was remade. Yes. They can't get the original footage. Got burnt in a warehouse fire. Oh my God!
Do you know what you can else do as well? You could do Blake 7, similar thing.
You could do it for a lot of stuff.
You could,
you could do it for 2001: A Space Odyssey, and just really piss everyone off.
But Blake 7 and even at the time, Blake 7 and Babylon 5, the space scenes let them down, even for the time.
So people are asking me if I was on James O'Brien today. I wasn't on James O'Brien. I was wrestling my computer all morning until it got to the point where I was like ringing Phil and going, "Listen, mate, you're gonna have to produce the show today because my GPU is at 100%, and it's nothing I can do about it."
You new one.
Gollum versus Predator. Gollum, the high school years. Star Wars. Gollum episode 1, the Phantom Gollum.
I mean, that won't be interesting. Do you know what? I had to be a bit pedantic the other day. So when Natalie Elphicke defected, there were all these because they did the big welcome thing, and and loads of people did their own sort of versions. They were a bit lazy with it, I have to say, but nonetheless, some of them were quite funny. And then one of them had like Sauron for Mordor East, and I wasn't having that. And I thought, no, hang on, Barad-dûr and Mount Doom are both jammed into the northwest of Mordor. And I said, look, at least make it believable. and people could say, oh yeah, but he could live in one constituency and be the MP for the other. And I'm thinking, no, because Mordor East would be a shithole. And the idea, because normally when you live in one constituency and the MP for the other, it's because you couldn't get selected as the candidate for the constituency you live in. So who is it that would have been considered by the Orc Party more senior than Sauron? So the whole thing was a nonsense. And if you were going to split Mordor up, you wouldn't split it up into east and west. It'd be north and south, because the plains of Gorgoroth would be a natural break point.
Well, I was geeking out. Someone just mentioned Paul Darrow, who he played Avon. Was it?
He was Avon in Blake 7.
In Blake 7. So he was he came to Fab Cafe when I was working there in Manchester. We had some celebrities along now and again. We had like Richard O'Brien came, and we had Sylvester McCoy, and we had a night where we had Paul Darrow, and it was a big Blake 7 night. And I just remember we had VHS tapes. That's how long ago it was, and we had like the final few episodes on tape, and I put this tape on, so it was on all the screens in the TVs in the bar. And someone actually came over to me and said, excuse me, would you mind playing a different episode of this? And I'm like, it's Blake 7. This is what you're here for. And he's like, yeah, this is the last episode, and it's rather depressing. So there you go. Blake 7, everyone.
Everyone dies.
Everyone dies at the end. Oh, spoilers.
It was a long time ago. If 40-year-old spoilers. Now, they're not watching it.
Yeah, exactly. Mission Gollum, Rogue Hobbit. The Gollum father. My laptop's getting called the potato now.
It is. That's what they are. That's what you call a computer that don't work anymore. It's a potato.
Owen says filthy Tolkien casuals vote for Sauron, but those of us who know the deep lore vote for Morgoth. Or Melkor, as I like to call him.
I mean, Melkor was his actual name.
Yes. So there you go. Vote for Melkor and his vice president Ungoliant.
I think they had a bit of a bust up.
Time for change is saying Fab's owners are proper Tories. That wouldn't surprise me. I left the place under a bit of a cloud, so let's not mention that anymore. Gollum, actually, we're getting loads of Gollum prequel name movies, which is really good. And apparently the Tomorrow People was originally in the UK, not in Australia. I saw the Australian version. I think that was in the 80s, wasn't it? One of my laptops is known as Ned's Atomic Laptop. Love it. Anyway, we should get back to politics. So what else has been happening this week apart from Natalie Elphicke's defection and the Tories doing really bad in the polls?
So the Conservatives at the moment, they're crowing about a few things. They're crowing that we're now out of recession. I mean, this was the one plus of not having the election last week, because if they had it last week, it would have been impossible to have the election before we could confirm we're out of recession. It's quite funny, though, because the Tories were calling it a technical recession, so now Labour are calling this a technical recovery. But it is absolutely important. Ed Conway, who does stuff for Sky, he's a proper economics reporter, and he's making the point, we're going on about GDP. We should talk about GDP per capita, and they're talking about growth. We've got the greatest GDP growth for 2 years. It's like, yeah. So let's have a look at that. So the reason for that is because we basically had no growth at all for 2 years in GDP per capita terms. We had no growth for 2 whole bloody years. So in actual fact, if we were to use GDP per capita as our measure of economic success, not GDP, we'd have had a massive recession.
Yes.
But even in terms of the growth we've got now, so we've now posted in the first quarter of this year growth of 0.6%, but again, that's bollocks. GDP per capita growth of 0.2%. France has 5 times that rate.
Yeah.
And France is very, very, it's right next door to us. It's same population size, same economy size. Lots of things are the same. So we should, there's nothing that can, or there's very few things that can hit us and not France. The only thing, I suppose, in theory, is because we have this massive banking sector. So if you have a banking crisis, yeah, okay, that hurts us more than France. But by and large, there's nothing else. So when people are going about global factors, what are these global factors that somehow affect us and not France?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they affect us and no one else in the world. It's as if we're the only country that did a Brexit and have a bunch of incompetence in charge. But when you talk about GDP per capita, it's gone down from about $50,000 per person in 2007 to $45,000 per person. That's a massive 10% decrease. And don't forget, everything's got more expensive in that same period. I had to pay a bill for in dollars yesterday, and it was $360 I had to pay, Phil, and I had to pay £300.
Sorry,
about $360. If I had done that 20 years ago, it would have cost me £180.
I've just got to pick out what Vendetta said here. They're still coming up with these songs, these titles. The Sound of Gollum. I've now just pictured Gollum with an alpine background singing "The Hills Are Alive" with the sound of the precious.
we've got Gollum does Mordor, which sounds completely wrong. We also got number 3. Meanwhile, the world is still getting warmer. Thank you very much, number 3, for the super chat. And yes,
bloody
yes,
is. It has got a lot warmer. It's boiling in here now.
The water temperature was a record high every day last year. The global temperature of the oceans, record high all last year, and this year it's an even bigger record high. This year, it's quite terrifying, and it's leading to coral bleaching. There's got to be flooding, because when water gets warmer, it expands, and also the retreat of the sea ice. We might be seeing our completely ice-free Arctic in less than 10 years now, thanks to the Tories, the Republicans, the oil companies,
also
the oil sheiks, the Middle East people.
People. I mean, Russia has a large part to play in this. Just when you create instability in the world, people focus on that.
Yeah, yeah.
So even they've been creating instability all over. We need to focus on this. All of a sudden, you threaten. It's seen as more. A war is seen as more immediate.
There's about half the countries in Africa. There's been some kind of interference by Wagner or by Russia. Half of them. And this is why we're getting refugees coming from all over Africa now. I mean, we were getting them from a handful of countries. Now we're getting them from a lot more.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, if Israel wants to bomb someone, it can bomb Moscow. That would do far more.
Yeah, I wouldn't despair too much. I've got a friend who lives in Moscow. Don't do that. Satnav says, most people are unaware that large parts of the Arctic waters are warming at 6 degrees already. Yeah, most people are unaware of lots of stuff when it comes to climate change, because it's hardly in the news when it should be people screaming about it every day. Like, oh my God, we need to be doing something about this yesterday.
Yeah.
There is a slight bit of good news in that the race for renewables has really hit its stride, and I think a third of the world's energy was created by renewables last year, which is fantastic, but still nowhere near as
it's
far.
Only about 46% in this country. We're falling back. The Tories, whenever they boast about how well the UK is doing, they're basically trading on what Labour put in place. They've fallen badly behind.
Yeah. The fact that we've had a ban on onshore wind farms for the last 8 years is just it's diabolical. And more than that, actually, it's nearly 10 years now. That's my point. The Tories are creating instability, says number 3. Yes, and right-wing governments around the world,
around
because
the world. Ours are largely ineffectual, you know. But you know, there are just there's a concerted effort around the world by, again, like you could fit these billionaires around a dinner party table, who are just deciding that division makes them richer.
Yeah, Katrina's saying Scotland's doing a lot better on renewables. It is, and one of the reasons why I'm quite fond of the SNP, all things considered. But at the same time, the rest of Britain is busy digging out as much oil as they can out of the North Sea.
I mean, you say that. Scotland. I am going to again say, remember, Labour were in power when a lot of that was done. The SNP have been, you know, I mean, do you know who? I mean, we had a lot of talk this week. I mean, just, you know, when I say, you know, people going, like even Stephen Flynn was going about the Natalie Elpit thing, like that. Do you know who you just made your deputy first minister, mate?
Yeah,
but never mind that. You know, remember their own energy minister, and this isn't just a recent appointment. This was Humza Yousaf. Their energy minister. Do you know what she did before she became an MSP?
No.
You know, when oil and gas companies. No.
She kicked dogs for a living.
Worse. You know how when oil and gas companies get in the shit for something and you need someone to smooth it over in the media? That was her job. Yeah. Covering for oil and gas companies.
Wow. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The Greens aren't keen.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, the Greens have walked away from the power sharing agreement. But yeah, Paul, thank you very much for the super chat. Wasn't Venezuela's last glacier just downgraded? Yes, Venezuela might well be the first country to lose all of its glaciers. And somewhat ironically, because Venezuela is a massive oil nation. I mean, it's one of the biggest oil exporters in the world. Run by Maduro for the last few years since he took over from Chavez, who carked it. And basically, they could be very rich and help people with their money. But no, they're voting to go to war with their neighbors so they can get, checks notes, more oil.
Yeah.
Because we need the oil. We need to burn it. We need to dig out the ground and burn it quickly. What's the rush? Why do we have to do? Why do we have to dig this out the ground and burn it? Because it's going to run out. Okay. Should we slow down then? No. I need the money. And Norway, the sovereign wealth fund, but Norway, it's got great green credentials when you look at how many cars last year were electric. It was almost 95% of all new cars bought were electric, which is fantastic. But at the same time, they're one of the biggest oil exporters in the world. And we get over half of our oil from Norway. Imported oil, I should say, from Norway.
Sarah's just asked a question there about the Starmer's Asylum speech today, which might be worth going over, because I've had this conversation quite a bit. She said, just watch Starmer's speech. He said very little on safe routes and nothing at all on processing asylum claims in France. What, WTF? So the reason for this, so there's two sides to the Labour's asylum policies. There's the processing of asylum claims, and there's the setting up of safe routes so that they don't feel the need to risk their lives crossing the channel. And that is all part of it, and Labour have talked about that. And the other side of it, of course, is tackling the criminal gangs, the people smugglers, right? And also, you will notice in Starmer's speech today an emphasis on deporting people who don't have a genuine claim to asylum, but to do that, you have to process their claims. So there's two sides to the policy. Only one of them is going to be mentioned in the mainstream media. You'll have to get used to that, I'm afraid. At the end of the day, most voters care about the undeserving type thing, because this is what they think. Like when the Tories, for example, are demonising asylum seekers, you know, they don't really, very few of them call them asylum seekers. They call them illegal immigrants. And when you try and say, hang on, they're fleeing war and persecution, they say, no, they're not. They're economic migrants. That's why they're coming into the country illegally, and that's why they're all young men and blah 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 blah, you know, and all the rest of it. So it's all about downplaying that. So that's the way the public think. So what Labour are doing is they're going to put all of the emphasis. In fact, when you've said hardly mentioned safe routes, I didn't hear any mention at all, quite frankly, but I didn't watch it all carefully. All of the emphasis when they make any major speech is going to be on the tackling of the criminal gangs, the people smuggling. The other thing Starmer brought up today was the fact that all that waste of money on Rwanda, yeah, that's bollocks. He said because, it's like 1% of all the people going to be sent there. You're just going to have this permanent. And he emphasised, and they need to do this, he emphasised you're going to have this permanent block of people, growing number of people in this country who are claiming asylum, but because the Tories' policy is not to process those claims, anyone who arrives in this country from like last July doesn't get processed at all. So they just stay here. And he emphasised the fact that that's why we're having to spend all this money on the hotels and blah, 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 blah. That is the message they're going to push. However, in terms of the policies, the other side of it will be there. Now, I'm not going to claim that in like 3 years' time, all the human rights lawyers are going to go, oh, this is brilliant, this is fantastic, we haven't got a problem. Because asylum is always a political hot potato. It was a political hot potato under Labour, and they tried coming up with... So again, what Labour will do is they will attempt to try and do as much processing offshore as possible. So I think they are going to want to do some deal with France where they can do a lot of that, because then that takes... Then what Labour can claim is there are no illegal immigrants in the country, that they are, or if they are properly smuggling themselves in. And that what they are doing is only bringing across the ones who pass their claims, so they're genuine. But you won't see them talk about that because that doesn't win you votes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they do have to stop the boats, and they have to stop the boats for two reasons. First of all, they are going to be put on the rack over it by the media. The media will not let them get away with anything. And secondly, because Labour are not actually arseholes, they know full well the Tories have failed on the boats. That's clear. They're going to lose the election. If Labour also fail, who's going to say that they are the only ones with a credible plan? Reform UK. Labour will not accept that.
But I mean, when we talk about safe routes, I need explain to me why we can't have the same system we had with Ukrainian refugees, where they could apply before they got here from whatever country they were in, which was usually Poland.
I mean, it was still a bad system, but yeah.
I know it's still a bad system, but at the moment, if you are from Congo, the only way you can claim asylum here is by getting here illegally.
Yeah. Or even Afghanistan, which the government will, if you ask a member of the government, is Afghanistan safe? For people who've criticised the Taliban, they will instantly go, no, they have no political problem saying, no, it's not at all safe. And yet there's no safe route for people even from Afghanistan.
And I'd rather, if people have a couple of grand that they're going to spend on giving to people smugglers, I would much rather that they save that money, pay for the processing of their asylum claims, pay for the accommodation wherever they are while that is being processed, and then come over here, welcomed into the country with somewhere to live, already set up. And also, we need to do stuff like sponsorship, where people can sponsor refugees. We did this with Ukrainian refugees. I don't understand why they haven't rolled that out to us.
That I do understand. And it's like some people will say as well, you should be able to claim asylum at any British embassy. Now, even Labour won't do that. And we know why they won't do that, because the easier you make it, the more people will claim it. Because if you make it easier for someone who's still in Africa, say, to claim asylum with the UK than it is for any number of other countries in between, all of a sudden we're going to get a load of extra claims. So even Labour, because it is such a political hot potato, even though the number of asylum claims is really tiny, but it is such a hot potato, even Labour won't make it easy. But what they won't do is allow, people to, like, the crossing the channel is politically bad as well as inhumane.
Yes. Well, what I'm saying is, like, I'm not saying to claim at any embassy.
No, but some people are.
I think that you should have to present yourself to an embassy anywhere in the world, and give your fingerprints, get your eyes scanned or whatever. That's put on the record, and then you're told, okay, we're going to process your claim. It's going to cost 500 quid or whatever it is to process the claim, plus an extra 50 quid admin or whatever whatever you want to set that price.
That would increase
the
number.
But it means we get money coming in.
I know, but the media
from other countries,
the media will push the number. They will just publish the number. They don't want it. They're trying to say, well, actually, they don't care. The billionaires don't. They love immigrants because they're cheaper. But they will push. It's also their main vehicle for pushing division.
Yeah.
So no, what Labour will need to do is to stop the boats, and we know the only way to do that is to be able to give them a way of being able to claim asylum without having to cross the channel. That is the way you do it. It's really that simple.
Yeah. You're right. Owen in the chat saying the problem is that there's not enough houses for the people who live here in the first place, which is true to a certain extent, but it's only
our house building is appalling.
It's only true because of the Tories. They haven't built houses because they need to make house prices go up all the time, and house prices won't go up if there's more houses on the market, because you've got to create forced scarcity, which is the kind of, is it forced or false scarcity? It's manufactured scarcity of any given product, that because everything now is, lots of things that we use in everyday life is pretty much unlimited. So we have to manufactured scarcity.
Well, they've sort of done the same trick with their NHS claims. They're claiming this week, oh, we've got the biggest fall in NHS waiting lists over a 6-month period in over 10 years. It's like, actually, over 10 years, if you go a little bit beyond over 10 years ago, I think you'll find, and I did the maths on this, the fall in Labour's waiting lists under their government was much higher than yours. But what they've done is effectively create scarcity artificially.
Yeah.
Because the way they've got this small drop in waiting lists now, but by the way, they're claiming this, between September and February it dropped by this much, but actually it's the seasonality in NHS waiting lists. If you compare March this year with March last year, it's higher still. Now it will fall, but they use the NHS strikes to effectively create scarcity of healthcare. They gave real terms pay cuts to NHS medics in a cost of living crisis, therefore inviting the strikes. Then they didn't negotiate them with a very long time. And what that has done, because they wouldn't negotiate them for a long time, they've created higher waiting lists than would otherwise be the case, so that then they could then deal with the strikes in election year and have the waiting lists appear to fall, but it's not real, because if they'd dealt with the strikes in the first place, those waiting lists would still have gone up, not as much. Yeah. So all they've done is like squeeze the hosepipe a bit and then release it a bit.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a classic con trick to fiddle numbers. You make something, if a number needs to be smaller, like waiting lists, you artificially make them bigger than they need to be, so that as the election comes up, you can then get them to go down a bit.
The Tories fixing problems that they created.
Exactly. There's no investment in the NHS. They've not actually improved anything. They just took their foot off the hosepipe a bit.
Or they'll say, record investments in the NHS, but what they really mean is like they've given more money than they did last year, but that's inflation. It doesn't even cover the extra costs of
increasingly
stuff.
to profits.
Yeah, to private companies. They should
be made
to shareholders.
They should be made. I would love for Labour to do this. I bet they don't. But I would love for Labour to actually break down to when they report NHS, the budget, it's NHS budget, not separate it out from healthcare spending completely. And I don't just mean, because they sort of do that, but what they mean there is there's an extra budget for the Department for Health and Social Care to like cover the civil service. No, I mean healthcare spending, split it up into NHS spend and private spend. So even money that goes into the NHS, but then they have to subcontract out a private contract. No, that's private spend. Don't count that.
Yeah.
Change the baseline for what we call NHS investment.
Indeed. I mean, it galls me the way that what I think should be public services, some of that money is going to people who are billionaires. And I just don't understand how anyone thinks that's an acceptable system to have. Oh, and foreign billionaires as well, which is the mad thing about any kind of private company that's running something for our government, or being paid for or subsidized by taxpayers. A lot of the investors in these companies, or even the owners of the companies, aren't from this country. No. And that's literally money going out of the country to be given to billionaires. Yeah. And when people go, but it's the asylum seekers that are causing all the problems. And it's like, no. They're not the big problem. The big problem are the billionaires, foreign billionaires. Rupert Murdoch.
Asylum seekers could do jobs that we need them to do. Yeah. Because the benefit of an asylum seeker is you could say, well, okay, but you have to live here. I mean, they might not want to. They might have a family somewhere else. I mean, try and be a bit flexible. But you could say, this is where we've got jobs. You know, your license effectively is based on you going there because there's a job you can do there.
Yeah.
That we can't fill.
Owen has just made a good point. Thank you very much for the super chat, Owen. The NHS budget should be treated like the military budget and have a percentage of GDP.
I say it hasn't worked because the military budget went down as well.
Yeah.
It was actually going up as a share of GDP
budget
under Labour. Even after the banking crisis, NHS, actually it was easy, I suppose, because of a recession. But nonetheless, the NHS did not suffer because it wasn't getting extra investment as such, but it was still getting it got a higher proportion of funding as a measure of GDP in 2010 than it did in 2007. So,
cray.
And then it all stopped. And you can see it in the waiting list. Under Labour, under the Tories, bang. Up
again. Bastards.
Immediately as well.
250 people dying each week waiting for A&E under the Tories. British people dying. If that was a foreign occupying power executing 250 Brits every week, I think we'd have some words to say about that.
You keep getting news stories as well. There was someone, I think it was in the news last week or something, died in A&E. And they were in A&E for like 12 hours or something.
Wow.
They actually got to hospital in plenty of time and died because of the wait. They were actually in hospital.
Man.
So we don't even have, and this is not the fault of the NHS staff. You know, there's not enough. You know, there's lots of people going to A&E that really shouldn't be going to A&E. It's not their fault either. There's, you know, where they should have gone before. There's no capacity there either.
I hate the Tories. I hate them so much. Anyway, Phil, we're going to have to wrap it up. We've gone 15 minutes over the budget. We've gone over budget, over time and over budget. But thank you very much for the chat. Thanks so much, Phil, and for everyone who's offered their words of wisdom and their quite funny jokes about puns on Gollum's prequel film.
Final super chat sneaked in.
We have from Don K. Thank you very much from Don K. For the £5.55, that's very precise, super chat. It's not just the evil of billionaires, Labour Social. A million new Tory millionaires have a lot of power in Little Britain in it. Yeah, you're right. There are lots and lots of millionaires now. But they're only a millionaire because the house is worth $1 million. The house that they bought for £2.50 back in 1962. So, yeah, it's a bit galling. And 31 Blaze says, this is why I don't work in the NHS anymore. It was so demoralizing when you work till you drop but still felt that you hadn't done enough, which is, you know, that's the Tories' MO, isn't it? Just get rid of people who are experienced and replace them with people who are inexperienced, and then say, oh, we've created 20,000 new roles. We've created 20,000 new jobs. They haven't. Yeah. They've barely, and it's in terms of experience, years of experience.
Yeah,
we've lost millions of years of experience across the public sector.
Yeah,
bastards. Anyway, anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's fine. We could go on forever, couldn't we?
Okay, All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up there. Phil, you're going to have to press the big button to stop this.
I will.
So I'll just say we'll be back at 9:00 for the Labour Social. Look, I'm going to run it from my laptop.
I may have to run
if
this
it doesn't.
One again.
If it doesn't work,
I may be able to do this one. I may have to do this. I'm not going to the gym. My gym buddy is currently shitting her brains out. So,
nice.
She's got a bit of a bug. So I suspect I'm not going to the gym tonight. So it'll be all right.
Too much information, Phil. But thank you. So, do you want to host it tonight?
I might as well host it tonight. It'll be a bit of a mess. It'll be a huge mess with people coming in and out because I'm not accustomed to dealing with people coming in and out. But you'll have to guide me through that process by not coming on 5 minutes before.
Well, if you just get Zoom and then have the
Tell
Zoom
me in
screen,
a minute, they don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll finish there. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a great day, and until next time, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Right, they've gone.